Oh, can I get a grape?
Oh, yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to It's 420 Somewhere. Today we have a story on Kevin Durant and some vape cartridges that you gotta watch out for. Okay, first up, Kevin Durant is apparently a smoker, we assume, because he has now teamed up with Weed Maps to create videos, to create content that combats negative stigmas around marijuana. Here's a little clip of him talking about it.
The stigma from your perspective, I would imagine, is gone amongst your peers and amongst, the NBA.
Most definitely. I mean, the stigma in society, it's like you said, the Band-Aid's been ripped off. In the sports world, it's kind of an undercover thing that players use cannabis and used it throughout while they're actively playing. And I always thought that was an interesting thing. Even as I started to come into the league, you hear the conversation more and more around the league about it. And I thought it was always interesting that the rest of the world was a little slower to be open about cannabis and its use.
So the way I see this, that's great. That's awesome that he's doing this. I think it's important things for celebrities, especially celebrities who smoke, to do. But just as important is for him to go out there and say his smoking habits. He hasn't necessarily said anything about his own smoking habits, and I understand that the NBA itself is kind of in this little limbo period where they're not suspending anybody anymore because of weed smoking, and they're not even testing for weed smoking. However, it's still technically not allowed in the organization. But if he were to come out and say specifically, I smoke weed, this is how I smoke weed, this is when I smoke weed, this is why I like doing it, that does way more than anything else, as long as he's hiding behind a curtain. So he needs to kind of open up, and he doesn't need to, but I just think that would be much more impactful than even doing this. Quick little story: Ohio is getting marijuana legalization on the ballot for 2022, and as we all know, when marijuana legalization is on a ballot, it almost always goes in the favor of legalization. So Ohio is looking to probably next year legalize marijuana. So that's a good thing. Ohio is one of those states that has kind of a swing, and more so red. So it's pretty great to see this, and it's very helpful that it's on the ballot. So that's something to look out for next year. Final story of the day is about an active ingredient in vaping cartridges, and as most people know, there has been this big scare, fear-mongering thing about vape cartridges that happened a couple years back, mainly because of vitamin E acetate that was used in illicit vape cartridges. And this is another ingredient that is typically used in illicit ones. The ingredient itself is called Phytol. It's basically a thinning agent called propylene glycol that is mixed with cannabis oil. So what it does is it kind of waters down the THC levels of vaping cartridges, and it dilutes. So it allows people to make more bang for the buck, basically. It's not used as much in legal vaping, but it is also used there. And the big problem with it is that there was a study done a couple years ago, or I think last year. There's a study done last year by Canopy Growth. It was a private study, so it was not out. It didn't come out. However, people started to think that it said something bad when Canopy Growth took all Phytol products out of their markets in Canada. And eventually it came out a couple months ago that this ingredient Phytol, when used with rats, and they were really pumping the rats with a lot of the Phytol, but when they did this in the study, they had intense lung damage. They had to stop the study short because it was so clear that this was a problem. It was really scary results that they were seeing. So because of this, Canopy Growth decided, okay, we're not going to deal with this ingredient at all. However, they kept it private. And then, like I said, a couple months ago, it came out, and now this is kind of causing a bit of a bigger storm, because there are legal products that use Phytol, and they're out there claiming the study is not something to base anything off of, because it's basically like hitting a vape 250 times within a 30-minute span. So it was a lot of Phytol that they were being exposed to. But still, what the study didn't find is where that threshold is, where the threshold was where it's too much Phytol as opposed to enough, or an okay amount. And the question really is now, is there even an okay amount? So the lesson out of this entire story is, don't get any vaping cartridges or vape pens from an illicit market, because you just don't know what they're putting in it. They don't have any regulations. They don't have anything that they need to be guided by, so they can just kind of pump it with a bunch of stuff. And they don't put any vitamin E acetate in anymore because of people dying because of it. But now we're finding Phytol, and we'll probably find other ingredients that they'll use that we're not totally sure of what they do and if they're okay for us to even consume. Because vaping itself is still in that kind of new frontier phase where we're just trying things, we're throwing things at the wall. There isn't a whole lot of regulation in even the legal market of vaping, but there's much, much more, of course. So just stick to that stuff is basically what this story boils down to. And that's what we've got today. We'll be back on Wednesday with more stories. See you then.
This is possibly the funniest thing I've ever seen on Hinge. I'm not joking. Taylor's most controversial opinion is he shot JFK. His head just did that.